The body requires nutrients such as proteins, lipids, and carbohydrates, as well as electrolytes, vitamins, and water. All of this is provided through the digestive system. This lesson is an introduction to the physiology of the digestive system, and here we will explore the extrinsic and intrinsic control of the gastrointestinal tract. The digestive system is composed of two parts, the gastrointestinal tract and accessory glands. The gastrointestinal tract is a tubular structure consisting of the mouth, pharynx, esophagus, stomach. The stomach is subdivided into the cardia, fundus, body, and pylorus. The small intestine, which is subdivided into the duodenum, jejunum, and ileum, and the large intestine, divided into the cecum, colon, rectum, and finally the anus. The accessory glands include the salivary glands, liver, and pancreas. The digestive system is a complex structure with numerous anatomical and physiological peculiarities depending on the species being studied. Its primary function is to break down the macromolecules ingested through food into micromolecules, making them small enough to be absorbed by the intestinal epithelium. To break down nutrients at this level, the system performs 5 main functions: motility, secretion, digestion, absorption, and storage. However, to carry out these functions, everything must be strictly controlled. That's why there are 2 levels of control: extrinsic and intrinsic. The extrinsic level includes the nervous and endocrine systems. The intrinsic level consists of the enteric nervous system and the gastrointestinal endocrine system. The substances secreted by these systems are not directly involved in digestion, but regulate the secretory activity of cells and motility. We will go over each of these, but before we begin, don't forget to like the video. Let's start with the extrinsic control. First, the nervous system. The nervous system sends nerve fibers to the gastrointestinal tract, primarily through 2 nerves, the vagus and splanchnic nerves. The vagus nerve has parasympathetic efferent fibers that carry information from the central nervous system to the gastrointestinal tract, and afferent fibers that bring information from the gastrointestinal tract to the CNS. Parasympathetic nerve fibers communicate with the enteric nervous system and stimulate motility and secretion in the gastrointestinal tract. The splanchnic nerve sends sympathetic efferent fibers, which generally have an inhibitory effect, counteracting parasympathetic activity. The second extrinsic component is the endocrine system. The hormone secreted outside the gastrointestinal tract that acts directly on it is aldosterone. Aldosterone is secreted by the adrenal cortex in response to stimulation by the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system. Its function in the digestive system is to increase sodium and water reabsorption in the large intestine and salivary glands. Now let's look at intrinsic control. As the name suggests, this level of control is located within the gastrointestinal tract itself, and it involves different cells that secrete various chemicals that act on other cells. Depending on how these substances reach their targets, they are given different names. Paracrines are secreted into the interstitial fluid and affect nearby cells through diffusion. Autocrines act on the cell that secreted them. Endocrine substances enter the bloodstream to act on distant tissues. Finally, neurocrines are secreted by neurons. The enteric nervous system contains a high density of neurons, with up to 100 million neurons in some species, which can even surpass the number found in the spinal cord. This means the enteric nervous system is an extremely sophisticated system, providing fine control of digestive functions. Because it has its own system, it can operate independently of the central nervous system, similar to how the heart functions. To recap histology in general, the gastrointestinal tract consists of 4 layers: the mucosa, submucosa, muscular layer, which is divided into an inner circular and an outer longitudinal layer, and finally the serosa. The enteric nervous system is located within the wall of the gastrointestinal tract and consists of 2 ganglionated plexuses: the submucosal plexus in the submucosa, which controls secretions and local blood flow, and the myenteric plexus, situated between the inner circular and outer longitudinal muscles, which controls gastrointestinal movements. The sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems indirectly control gastrointestinal activities because their nerves connect to these plexuses. The 2 plexuses communicate with each other through neurons, and there are 3 types: sensory or afferent neurons, motor or efferent neurons, and interneurons. There are also receptors, mechanoreceptors and chemoreceptors. Mechanoreceptors are located in the muscular layer and detect mechanical changes like the stretching of the gut wall, while chemoreceptors are found in the mucosal layer and detect chemical changes in the intestinal lumen. Once these changes are detected, the information is sent to sensory neurons. Motor neurons innervate muscles, blood vessels, and glands, and their actions can be inhibitory or excitatory, depending on the substances they secrete. One difference between enteric neurons and classic neurons in the nervous system is that enteric neurons have swellings along the axon branches called varicosities. These are vesicles containing various regulatory substances, collectively called neurocrines, as mentioned earlier. Neurocrines are released from these varicosities, influencing the activity of glands and smooth muscle. This configuration allows substances to be released over a wider area. There are excitatory and inhibitory neurons, and what defines their action is the type of neurocrine they release. For example, neurons that release acetylcholine have an excitatory effect, while those that release adrenaline are inhibitory. Other examples include substance P, excitatory, vasoactive intestinal peptide, and nitric oxide, both inhibitory. In addition to neurons, the enteric nervous system also has a special type of cell, the interstitial cells of Cajal. These cells have several projections and are in contact with smooth muscle and enteric nervous system neurons. They are essential for the coordinated motility of the gastrointestinal smooth muscle and function as a type of pacemaker. We will study them in the next lesson. Now let's move on to the endocrine system. As we've already discussed, substances are given different names depending on how they reach their target cells, paracrine, autocrine, or endocrine. Both endocrine and paracrine cells have a different configuration from other cells. They have a narrow apex and a wider base. The apex faces the lumen, allowing these cells to detect the contents passing through the gastrointestinal tract and respond accordingly. The wide base is filled with secretory granules containing substances that are released from the base. For example, when food rich in fat enters the intestine, these cells detect this composition and release a hormone called cholecystokinin, which acts on the gallbladder. This is just one example of how it works. These cells are dispersed among the epithelial cells of the mucosa. A wide variety of molecules are secreted in the gastrointestinal tract, and some of these substances are classified as hormones. The main intestinal hormones include secretin, which is secreted by S cells in response to gastric acid, fat, and bile acids. Its function is to stimulate the secretion of pancreatic juice and bile while inhibiting hydrochloric acid secretion from the stomach, and it also slows gastric emptying. Gastrin is secreted by the stomach in response to the presence of proteins and gastric distension. Its function is to increase the secretion of hydrochloric acid. Cholecystokinin is secreted by the duodenum in response to the presence of fat and proteins. It stimulates gallbladder contraction and the secretion of pancreatic juice, and also inhibits gastric emptying. These are the main hormones that control gastrointestinal function. Lastly, in addition to extrinsic and intrinsic control, the immune system also plays a role in regulating gastrointestinal functions. The mucosa of the digestive system is exposed to numerous agents daily, making an effective defense system essential. Immune cells scattered throughout the gastrointestinal mucosa respond by secreting antibodies, creating memory cells, recruiting other cells to combat invaders, and releasing various chemicals known as pro-inflammatory cytokines. These cytokines interact directly with the endocrine system and the enteric nervous system to regulate motility and secretion. For example, when a toxin is detected, immune cells secrete these substances to increase secretion, dilute the toxin, and stimulate motility to eliminate the harmful agent, which can sometimes result in diarrhea. This mechanism keeps the gastrointestinal tract protected. In the next lesson, we will discuss gastrointestinal motility. See you next time.